All right, we're going to talk all about your marriage after baby. So all of the difficulties that you might find, the joys, and how to get through it and really have a thriving marriage even after babies. Let's get started.
This is the Balanced Family Podcast with Ben
and Jessica. There's a lot to balance when you have a family: marriage, kids, health, career, while you're trying to balance all the opinions out there on how to do things right.
Today, we'll cut through the noise, tackle hard questions, and share stories as we try to get to the heart of the things that really matter. Okay, before we get into this discussion, we have the first winner of the 30-day challenge. If you don't know what the 30-day challenge is, you need to go listen to episode 2, which is called The 30 Days That Saved Our Marriage or something like that. Well, in that challenge, we talk about a specific thing we did for 30 days in that episode that totally transformed our marriage. And then we challenge people listening to that. It's written in the show notes and stuff like that, that if you do that challenge and then write us an email about how it impacted your marriage, you get into a drawing where you can win $100 on us for you to go on a date night. So we have our first winners. They asked to be anonymous. They are real.
Fine. Yes.
We can make up names for them.
Yeah.
How about it? What should the lady's name?
Peggy.
Peggy? I was going to say Ricky.
Peggy and Ricky.
Now, the problem with, what if there actually is a couple out there named Peggy and Ricky?
Well, we're not talking about you. These are made up names.
If you're actually Peggy and Ricky, you're not the winner.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You know who you are. But all right, so Peggy wrote, I'm currently 3 months postpartum with my first. Me and my husband did your birth classes, and we're so excited for this podcast. When I say this marriage challenge couldn't have come at a better time, I truly mean it. Everyone says postpartum is hard on couples, and I think I prepared for every aspect of postpartum except the marriage part. We are on a struggle bus. We are both sleep deprived, finding our new rhythm, dodging unwanted advice left and right. Haha. Yes, haha. And by the end of the day, utterly exhausted. And to be honest, the thought of trying to fix our relationship right now is just too overwhelming. We just kind of both put it on the back burner and figure it will work itself out as our baby gets older and we find our routine. This challenge was amazing for us, and we are still doing it. Having something easy and essentially mindless at the end of our day to remind each other that we are a team has been so helpful. And it's fun to have a little laugh at old memories, and I've learned so much about what my husband prioritizes in our relationship by what he has said. Thank you for this bright spot in our day, and that hopefully we continue way past 30 days.
Man, there's a lot in that. I love that. So if you don't know what the challenge is, you got to go back and listen to the episode.
You got to get the full context.
But it basically has to do with something you do daily that you say to each other at the end of the day. And it's challenging. It really is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
What stands out to you in that story there, Jess?
I think the way that she learned what her husband prioritizes in their relationship by what he says to her, I think that is honestly just really awesome because, again, the whole purpose of the challenge is to take you out of yourself and your own little world and to actually look at the person across the room from you who you are a team with and to say, the challenge. Are we not saying what the challenge is? Are we leaving it a mystery? So
they have to go listen to the episode and know what it is.
I think that I really love that she is taking it kind of one step further and is listening to what her husband is saying to her and learning from it and being like, oh, interesting. He is saying blank to me. And so that must mean that that's a really big deal or that stands out to him. And maybe if she would have asked herself last month what she thought her husband cared about or prioritized about, maybe it would have been different. And so I think that it's taking it to the next level and really not only just appreciating your spouse, but then also learning what are the things that make them tick. Then how then can I do more of that to show them that I love them, which I think is what she's saying. And I think that's awesome.
She said, I think I prepared for every aspect of postpartum except the marriage part. And I feel like that is the story of common marriage. Yeah. It's you get pregnant and that's the last thing that you're really thinking about because there's just so much. And then it hits you. And honestly, even if you do prepare your best, which we talk about a lot, and even in our birth class, preparing your marriage, you're just still not fully prepared for what the strain that comes on your marriage because you've never been stretched like this before in your life.
No, guarantee it.
On an individual
Grad
level,
school,
on a relational
like,
level.
nope, this ain't the same.
Yeah, it's like there ain't no like team building exercise that you'll learn in the corporate world that's going to equip you to partner in a marriage in this type of context. It pushes you to your limits.
Absolute limits.
So every marriage, like this is like one of the hardest stages of just where you're refined through fire.
Yeah. And I think to her point when she was saying, we hope that things will just kind of resolve as our baby gets older. And I think that, yes, like a lot of things do kind of smooth out is what I would say. But I do think that there is a caution that I feel with that, because if you do just kind of allow those little microaggressions, those little micro, irritations, all the things that go into postpartum, if you allow those to continue, and they'll only grow.
Yeah.
Because then you have more kids, and then you have added complexity to your life in general. Then what I find is a lot of couples 10 years later, then all of a sudden start coming out of the fog, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm married. Mm-hmm. I have this relationship. And it's not that it's too late, but that there's just it's just such a mountain of stuff there that then you have to really work through. And it, unfortunately, some couples decide we have grown so far apart that we would rather just get divorced at this point. Right. And so I think that although that's the whole purpose of the 30-day challenge, is to say like, hey, like don't wait. Don't wait until you're 10 years down the road and your roommates, like start engaging this process now with something that's really easy. Like she said, it's almost mindless. It's easy to do, and it will help kind of keep things humming and keep things moving forward in your marriage, so that then, like we are experiencing, we're 11 years now down the road, and our marriage has never been stronger. Right. It's never been better. Yeah. Like it's so much better than when before we had kids, like infinitely better. And that's really what you want. You want kids to be able to bring your marriage to another level. And that's kind of what we're going to actually talk about today, is how to bring your marriage to the next level while you're having kids, because it's not impossible, but it takes some intentionality.
Well, I guess honestly, we're kind of already talking about it because this story was so perfect. So transition, because she says,
thank you, Peggy.
She says, to be honest, the thought of trying to fix our relationship right now is just too overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
I get it.
That's why you and I are so passionate about finding small, practical things to get you out of the groove of cynicism, negativity, woe is me. Just like you're in a sleep deprived state, like you said already. So you have to be actively trying to find a way to break your mind out of that just like negative cycle that you can get in. That's why if we want you guys to do the 30-day challenge, and we're going to have it ongoing. Like
it's not too late.
I don't know if we'll ever end it. Like I think every few episodes we'll read one of these, and you could win $100 and go have a nice steak.
Go have a nice steak dinner.
But as we transition into just love after baby, I can go ahead and begin.
Go for it.
One of those, I would say one of the hardest things is like identity shift in specifically the transition from 0 to 1 kid. Like your head's spinning because you don't really know who you are anymore in some terms. And even if you do, you're still trying to like grasp with all the changes. And what I mean by identity is like you, for good or worse, there's good things that produce identity in us and there's bad things. And there's so many factors, but like, let's take, for example, just like career and our Western culture's perspective on just like how that's supposed to go. Well, as you know, like women a lot of times have to cope with a lot of hard stuff when they start to realize that maybe that transition back to work is not going to be as smooth as they imagine. And
they feel split on the inside. It's hard.
Yeah. They feel really split. And then men, a lot of times, they all of a sudden their attention is divided and they're not just having to focus on themselves anymore. And they've never actually, I know it sounds harsh, but a lot of men have just never really had like real responsibility of like another person. I know that was my experience. And so you're just grappling with like who am I now in this new stage? But looking back on how that impacted our marriage, it was like, that's why it was so hard, because we were wrestling with stuff individually, not just as a couple.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think the transition to motherhood is like the most intense transition of your life. Besides, I mean, it's more intense in puberty for sure, even just hormonally, but otherwise you now all of a sudden biologically you're different. Your brain is different. Like literally the way your brain works is different for 2 years after you have a baby. So if you keep having babies, your brain is just different for a really long time, until you're 2 years after your last baby. And so the way that you think changes, and that can be really discombobulating because your whole focus does become very, very focused on your kids, which is biological.
Right.
It's meant to be like that. But in our world, in our society, it's so complex. Women, like you said, also have career considerations. And a lot of women are waiting to have kids because they want to grow their career. But I think what's happening is we're having a bit of a crisis for a lot of these women who have built up really, really amazing careers. And then they decide to become moms, have babies, and they actually like are really split, and it's really difficult. And I don't really have but this isn't an episode about women and careers and having babies, but I think that it just only contributes to what you're describing, which is like a crisis of identity and this process of really becoming a new person, that then you're watching then your spouse have the same process to an extent as well. And then you're also then grappling with the sleep deprivation and just the stressors of life. And that is just a perfect combo for just struggle, because then you're like, I don't even really know if I know you anymore or know you in the same way that we did before kids.
Yeah. Or it's just kind of like your whole footing. Sometimes it gets destabilized. Well, but I think where I was going with that, Jess, is like, you talk about that struggle women have. Now for women, try to throw on this burden of being an amazing wife and meeting your husband's needs. Like the overwhelmingness of that.
Oh, yeah, it's very overwhelming.
You're just like, no. It's kind of the response a lot of women have, is just like, there's only so much I can like think about.
And a lot of women feel a lot of guilt about that too. I get messages from them. They're like, I feel so guilty because I can't do everything at 100% anymore.
Exactly.
And that's actually the part of the identity shift. That is a part of becoming a mother, is learning how to divide your energy and learning how to literally become this new person that has varying priorities. And so that can just be really destabilizing for a relationship. And I know for men, a lot of men then are kind of bewildered because they're like, what is happening to my wife? I mean, we've gotten messages before from men who are like, I don't even know my wife anymore. And it's like, yes, you don't. You actually don't.
Because you're both changing.
Because literally she's becoming a new person. And so instead of being bewildered and kind of like, oh, this like scary person that I don't know, it's like, no, actually, like, let's embrace that change and let's go on a discovery process together during this really intense, but really formative season of your life of having kids for your marriage.
So this title, this episode, is A Roadmap for a Happy Marriage. And so we have some kind of like steps in that roadmap, but
practical things.
Step one, I would say, is leveling expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the first big step for the husband and the wife. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, actually, I would like for you to talk about that. What would you think would be an expectation that you would need to level?
Well, and I'm going to talk more about this in step 2 about what should be expected of men. But I mean, men have certain things that they wish that they could all have from their wives. And this,
I see.
All
those kinds of expectations.
Well, I mean, there's a diverse
expectations.
Expectations.
I see.
Yeah, and
that's so funny. My mind did not go there. So clearly, there's a difference.
A lot of men, that is a first thought, and that is something you've got to understand. Like, after women have babies, that whole area changes.
It changes,
and it's something to celebrate. And not mourn.
Yeah.
If you as a man perceive it right. So that's a simple, practical one. It's like, dude, you better level your expectations early on and understand that whole thing changes. But I would also just say, in general, just the lack of freedom that you have after you have kids. men, and I'm talking a lot about
yeah. I now that you're talking, I'm getting some more stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like men are used to a lot of freedom. Like I said earlier, they never even had to have demand to care for another human being. Not that all women have had that experience before, but typically women are socialized differently. They are around younger kids. Like they kind of like understand what's ahead, and as a mom, like
to an extent, yeah.
And so dads dream about when their kids are older and teaching them baseball and taking them to, go camping. Like dads think about that. They don't dream about, I can't wait to hold that baby in my arms and have him burp all over me. You know what I'm saying? And so
it's true.
You got to level your expectations even about fatherhood. Like fatherhood is not, I remember lots of awesome vibes from the early days, but like to me, like it was work primarily. It was joyful work. But I wish that I had more, I leveled my expectations on just how that was going to just like roll for me as a man. And so then to throw in there like marriage, it felt like I just didn't know what to expect from just our relationship and getting to spend time together and relate together. I mean, we just like, you had a lot on your plate, and it just changed everything.
Yeah. So I would say then to that point about having a lot on the plate, I think a lot of women, when they get thrown into postpartum, when postpartum begins, there's a lot of expectations that, and I had an expectation that you would just read my mind. Like you would just know intuitively what to do, how to soothe a baby, how to change a diaper, how to bottle feed, how to whatever. And man, I get all the time on social media women who get so mad when I bring this up about how like it is unrealistic and unreasonable to expect the man, the dad, to know how to do all of that stuff to the level of the woman.
Yeah.
And I mean, people just roast me about that.
Yeah, they do.
But I am going to die on this hill. I think that it's insane to expect that of a man. They're like, he should be researching. I'm researching. I'm reading books. Why is he not? But we're talking about actually an instinctual biological mechanism in women that is different than men. We are
and sociological. It's been socialized
but I'm talking
too.
like
all across the board.
Sure, but you could you could take a boy, and this is now a new movement is like my little boys are going to know how to take care of babies and clean and cook. And so you can do that to your sons.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that even then, beyond that, if those same sons are put into a postpartum situation, they do not have the same biology. Like literally, they do not have the same hormones. They have oxytocin, yes, but not to the level that a mom does.
Right.
They do not have prolactin. They do like that is not surging in their bodies. So they also do not have the brain matter change that a woman does.
Yeah.
That actually there's a whole book I read called Mom Genes, not like jeans that you wear, but like GENES. It's all about the brain change in a mom. It's a really interesting read and floored me. And it helped me understand more of this expectation that women have because they're drowning, right? Like when you're in postpartum, you feel like you're drowning as a woman. It's the most exhilarating, wonderful, beautiful, like loving time of your life. And it is like, it also feels like drowning because you just have never done it before. And so, yeah, of course a mom wants their spouse to help them, like help, please help me. But the expectation then that they would just be able to walk in and be able to soothe that baby at 3 a.m. the same way that mom would, knowing that they don't even have breasts, like they can't breastfeed, like the mom is the one that's really what the baby wants at 3 a.m. is breast milk and nursing. Like all of that I think is just unrealistic. And so those expectations then create an us versus them mentality inside of marriage. Well, I'm over here working so hard and drowning and having the hormones and doing all of these things. And he's over there, like I've talked about, sipping his coffee and he has no idea what's happening.
Totally unaware. Yeah.
But the thing is that like the expectation that you would be able to read my mind. I remember saying like, gosh, I don't want to have to give you a list.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to tell you what to do. I remember saying this like verbatim to Ben. I don't want to have to tell you what to do. I just want for you to do it.
Yeah.
Because even just the act of telling you what to do was so stressful to me. Because it's like, I'm at max capacity. And so all that to say so the practicality of what I'm talking about, this tension of these expectations, is I had to realize, no, I actually do have to walk Ben through literally what I do, how to be able to offload to him. It's an unrealistic expectation for me to say that he would know exactly how to put my baby down, our baby, not just my baby, our baby. It feels like my baby when you're postpartum. Put my baby down to sleep, for example.
Right.
It's like I actually have to like show him like, hey, these are things that I found that were helpful. And then I also had to let go of control and allow him to figure it out on his own. And I know that we're talking about marriage and you might be like, well, this is all about babies and baby care, Jessica. But like in postpartum, like that is the thing. Like that is often the tension that I find from moms about their husbands. And so like this practical thing that I'm saying of like, no, like actually do sit down with him in a non-passive aggressive way and say, hey, I need help with blank.
Yeah.
And right now I'm going to walk you through how to do blank. And I want you to write notes. I want for you to literally write down what I'm saying. We're going to practice it together.
I job shadow.
Yeah. Like we're going to like actually do this. And I'm going to expect that you're going to need reminders because you are a human being who's also sleep deprived and you're not going to get it perfect the first time. And that's okay. And I'm going to offload this just like you would in a job. Like if you had and it's not that Ben's my employee, but sometimes it's helpful to think of it that way of like, yeah, if you have an employee that you are trying to offload a task to, you're not going to just train them once and be like, best of luck, especially with something like a baby that is so unpredictable. You do have to have that team mentality. And when you make that shift of that expectation, then things do just get so not smoother, but just so much more positive.
Yeah.
The environment becomes more positive. You do actually start being able to work as a team together to solve this problem of getting baby to sleep or whatever it is.
Yeah. To wrap up that about expectations, because I do want to say more about men and men's role in that, just to close the loop on expectations. One is just like the timeline, like coming to an understanding that it's a finite amount of time, that there's that amount of strain.
Yeah.
It's like we're big proponents of dealing with the root issues in your marriage, being proactive on that. But I mean, we both experienced like when we got out of that phase, like there really was
a release.
More brain space to deal with some things. And I just remember when that pressure started to eventually dissipate from just like that early stage of raising babies, like some things did get easier. And so we tell couples, it's like, yes, be proactive, deal with issues, don't sweep it under the rug, but understand like if things are tense and hard, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't work. It's like this moment is about being refined through fire, right? It's a journey and you just have to be patient, and be patient, not just with your spouse, but with yourself.
Right.
So to transition into step 2, though, I would say a pillar in our home and a key part of the roadmap for us is that in our home, I am the one to sacrifice first.
True.
I am the one that leads that dance. And this gets into a philosophy about equality and all this stuff that is completely misunderstood and perverted in our very highly equality obsessed culture. And this relates to our Christian faith. People believe that Christianity means patriarchy and male dominance and all this stuff. That is absolutely not biblical. What's biblical is that men lay down their lives as Christ laid down his life for the church. It's a metaphor. Like marriage is a metaphor for God's love for us. And one thing I had to learn that was so hard in our home was like when we had conflict and it was seeming like both people are right. You know what I'm saying?
We could be highly persuasive.
You know that those kind of arguments are the hardest, where you're like I hear what you're saying, but I believe my perspective is right. Is like I learned the secret of just laying down my life first. And here's an analogy. Let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a fire in your house, right? And you grab your things and you think your kids are with you and you run out of the house and you escape the fire. The whole family escaped the fire. And then all of a sudden you notice that one of the kids is missing and they're still in the house and the house is on fire. Who's the person that's going to run back into the house and save the kid? It's going to be me.
Yeah,
you know the answer to that question.
I do.
I would never, it's going to be me. And assuming the fire truck isn't there yet. So there's
Ben
that.
wants to be the hero. I'm just kidding.
But I'm saying the reason I give this analogy when we talk about men sacrificing and how leadership means sacrifice, leadership means servanthood, is that if you ask that question, nobody's going to disagree with you. And so to me, that is the metaphor for what leadership actually looks like. The foundation of it is that men have to sacrifice, men have to serve, men have to humble themselves. And you talked about earlier taking notes. I literally did that. I literally was like,
had a notepad.
It's like, put baby on, changing station, check. I had to learn how to take care of a baby, even though it was not natural. But there's a leader in our church, and he tells the young men, there's nothing that you can't do except breastfeed.
Yeah.
And if you accept that as a man, you realize that you can do anything else. Now, we have learned that I have some skills that
he has skill sets.
It's not good for me to do the cooking.
No.
It does end in disaster. I have a
God bless.
I have a lack of that skill set.
It's very true.
But that's just a big misunderstanding that people have about men and leadership, and it's just no, in my home, I lead by example, and I don't let my wife I don't let my wife have ever a place to say you're not sacrificing like I am. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think practically then in those early months, it looked like Ben, he had a job. He had a full-time job. Actually, he at times worked multiple jobs, and he would wake up at night to help out with baby, whether it was soothing, but obviously couldn't breastfeed, but if a baby, even to this day, if one of our kids wakes up in the middle of the night, they actually go to him. They don't actually go to me. And it's not because they don't love me. It's because that has been so ingrained that if they wake up in the middle of the night, daddy's going to come and help them get back settled. That actually is true. And that started early on with him getting up and, getting the baby for me. Now, that wasn't all the time. Sometimes It was practical. I would get up and go. I'm not saying literally every time he got up, but, I hear a lot of people who are that's just not fair because, the husband has to go to work the next day. He's bringing home the money so the lady can stay home and with her kids and whatever and eat bonbons or I don't know, whatever they think we do at home all day with 3 children under 4. Hi, I'm not eating bonbons. But anyway, yeah. And no, that's just such a warped way to even think about it because no, I am actually working too.
Yeah.
We both are working. It's just different. And in fact, he would always remark, man, Jessica, your day is a whole lot more stressful than mine.
Honestly, yeah, dude.
Mine was way more stressful than Ben's. Ben, he was working in an office. He got to go drink his coffee hot.
Yeah.
And I drank my coffee cold most of the day because I would make my coffee and then a bunch of kids would need me. So anyway, all that to say this principle of sacrifice, yeah, I can say absolutely 100% true. And for me,
and I wasn't perfect by any means.
Absolutely not.
And it was a process of growing up.
Yeah. But as a woman, man, what impact that has then when you start trying to have the thoughts of he doesn't care, he's not working, etc., which I did still have some of those thoughts because of the hormones and the struggle of life at that time. And I talked about that in episode 2. But it was very easy for me then to be able to be no, actually he does sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even just actual practical things either. It was, he would really be a sounding board for, figuring out issues with the kids. Even if it was hey, how do we want to approach, I'm trying to think eating at our table for dinner, should we have our kids, eat our food? Should we make them separate food? All these little micro decisions that a lot of times do end up falling on the woman to make. That was another example of him sacrificing, so to speak, was that we would always come along together and make those decisions together. We would actually talk it out together. Okay, what do we think? How do we want to approach that? Yeah, this might seem like a little tiny decision, but it actually has a lot to do with our family and the way that we want to, the values that we have inside of our family and the way we want to structure our family. And so there was a lot of him coming into my world, coming into woman world, so to speak, and like not domineering. It's not like he was coming in and being like, I think we should do this.
Absolutely not.
It was like we would sit down and I would present him the issue. I would present him the research. I would present him with all the things that were happening. And then we would problem solve together and come to a solution together. And again, like, I know it's like, oh, your guys aren't really talking about marriage. You're talking about baby care, but like that is it. Like this is how you build your marriage when you're having kids, is actually for real being a team and respecting each other so much that you want to do it together and you don't have this like, I'm going to go off and do this by myself kind of mentality. Yeah,
I think we almost like tricked people in a funny way when they read the title Love After Baby, because you think we're going to talk about like all this romance and
you got to have
all
like
the practical stuff. But here, that's the
candlelit dinners
like
together.
That's the point. It's like the phrase, like sex starts in the kitchen. Is like it's like romance starts with this like stuff. How you parent together. Yeah, and again, you paint me like I'm just like was like Superman. Like I was not perfect at all. And not every home looks exactly like that, where the man's just like doing, whenever we talk about this, it never fails. Somebody gets on social media and they're like, my husband's an air traffic controlman. And if he got up in the middle of the night, like everybody's going to die.
It's like, of course, then that's not the right structure.
My husband's a first responder, a paramedic. And I can't believe that you're asking men to get up. It's like, look at the principle, people. We're talking about a heart posture and just an awareness. Men have got to they got to come to a new level. There's the only thing they can't do is breastfeed. But I want to say something that is interesting. They have done studies with women, surveys about attractiveness in their husbands, and this is bona fide research. Seriously, that they asked women like, what makes you most attracted to your husband? They list these things like career, hard work, like providing, cooking, cleaning, and childcare. Which of those did women report is the sexiest thing?
It's called chore play. There's actually a term for it. Chore play.
That's actually false.
Oh,
that's actually
it's
funny.
Not?
No.
Okay.
It is childcare.
Oh, well, I guess that in my mind. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when it's like, would you rather see your husband cooking and cleaning, or would you rather see him handling the kids? It's always childcare.
That's actually very true.
Yeah.
But chore play isn't.
That is funny.
It still is a good bonus for sure.
So anyway, men, step up, lead by sacrificing. And let me tie this back to the whole thing about arguing and stuff too. And just like the tension you feel in this season is that applies to argue. I just remember arguments we had where it was just like, we both felt like we were right. If somebody's going to fall on their sword, I just learned to do that. And
he would apologize for what he felt like he could apologize for.
Yeah,
honestly.
I did. Yeah. And honestly,
it wasn't like he like faked an apology, but you would like be like, hey, I'm really sorry that I made you feel that way. That was really common.
Well, and I think there's a fear for men when they're going through that like, what if my wife is just abusing that? And it's just like, it's always my fault. That's
She's
something
a tyrant.
Men say that, like, it's always my fault. It's always my fault.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to just like time and expectations. It's like, you fall on your sword for 3 years, you earn the right to then have a discussion about, hey, I want you to really listen to my viewpoint, wife. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
please.
But when she's in the middle of all that turmoil and then you're trying to get on your soapbox, it just falls on deaf ears. Somebody has to fall on their source. And in my home, It's going to be...
You said source.
I'm such a nerd researcher. Somebody has to fall on their sword.
Fall on their source.
Fall on your sources. Somebody's going to fall on their sword, and in our home, it's going to be me.
Yeah, and I can also back that up. It's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Roadmap step number 3.
Are we really doing steps at this point? We're just
I literally have a list of stuff, and I made it all formal to sound cool. It's fine. But the next step in this roadmap, I would just say, is we have just learned to have grace on each other, recognize our strengths and weaknesses. I have such poor memory. You had to learn, like, I really am a good listener. I just don't remember things. You've had to learn that. And
it's still annoying sometimes.
It's still annoying. It's always there.
Literally, I mean, like, yeah, it's almost every day. It's like, you don't remember us having this conversation, but then he'll remember things like last episode, which we just recorded before this, about this random teacher assistant we had in grad school. It's like, what in the world? I would say too, a big part of that is respect. I had to learn to respect you because, and I talked about this again in episode 2, but the respect factor is really big when you don't actually respect your spouse and respect what they bring to the table. So not respect as like, I respect you as a person, but literally like saying, I respect what Ben brings to the table in our home and the fact that it is wildly different than what I do.
It may
personally.
not be quote unquote equal.
It may not even actually be equal, but I respect the way his brain works, for example, because Ben's brain works very different than my brain. We're literally complete polar opposites in the way that we think. And I always had a hard time, like, I was like, oh, like Ben's brain is a little different.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time respecting it. And that was really challenged when we had kids, because then you actually have like things you have to use your brain for. And, I'm a woman. Anyway, it was complicated in terms of finding that place of saying, I actually do respect the way that you process and the way that you think. And it brings and it adds value to our home.
Yeah.
It's not something that I need to try to change or I need to have him be better in. It's actually like, this is a fundamental difference between us, and they both have value and they both are important for our home. And I think that was a huge block for me, that again, the 30-day challenge was what really helped me actually solidify that inside of myself and to really feel convicted about how I lacked respect towards you, and then actively tried to change that inside of me.
Yeah.
So
romance starts with like a deep respect for each other and showing that respect, articulating that respect. And that you will naturally have more grace on each other when you just choose to value your spouse. Like love really is a choice. That's something that's so misunderstood in our culture. Like there's so much talk about compatibility and stuff like that. It's like love really is a choice. Like you choose to love that person and give your life to them and serve them and respect them and listen to them. Like you choose it or you don't. It's not an emotion that you just fall into. You don't fall into love and stay like it is work, yo. And I want to say one more thing. And I think a lot of people build their relationship based off of the first spark that they felt. Right.
I hear this a lot of like, we lost the spark. And it's like, no, now you have a fire.
Yeah.
Like, of course you don't have a spark. A spark is so teensy.
Yeah.
It's so like worldly. It's just like so superficial.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like what you actually have now is a burning fire that you got to keep going, and you got to keep, feeding, kindling, feeding wood to it. But like your love then becomes this deep thing that isn't superficial, isn't based on butterflies in your stomach and, physical attraction and this, magnetism that you felt. Like it actually is then this much higher love, in my opinion. Yeah. That then, of course, you do still, you have to do things to actively keep, the more superficial parts of your love. I mean, that's not to say that those things are bad, but I am saying that, like, I think that a lot of couples end up not making it because they expect that when their kids get older, that all of a sudden they're going to get to go back to the spark days, the pre-marriage days. And it's like, no,
you don't, like, you don't have that. Now. You don't feel it.
No,
you don't feel love.
No,
when you're raising babies like you did before. Like, and this is where I can brag on you a little bit, Jessica, since you're like bragging on me earlier. Like I can look back into times when it was hard, especially in hindsight, I can see it was really hard for you. Like you chose to love me. You chose to listen to me, like the very best that you could. Like, even if it didn't meet, my expectations, or it didn't feel, sometimes it would feel like you weren't, listening and loving me. But like, I look back, and I remember looking back in that season and like recognizing like, wow, that was like she chose in that moment to like pay attention to me. Like she chose to do her very best, even though it was a really hard season for you. And I just remember that meaning a lot to me. And that kind of settles the score in a bit of like, it's not just all like men have just there's no responsibility on the woman to love their husband. Like this is not true. And you embrace that so well. And it always meant a lot to me. Like you never had this sense of like, I'm going to take a vacation from Ben and our marriage for 5 years.
Right, I'm just going to focus on the kids. And yeah, that's not.
It's like
wasn't the way I thought.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that because I think that was noble.
I got really into football because Ben really liked football. I'm serious. This was like legit choice of mine. Ben is a man of hobbies, and he was starting to get really into NFL football. And I don't know why. I just felt this thing inside of me that was like, I want to get into it with him. Like I want to share this with him. And I honestly don't love football. Well, sorry. Like I don't. It's something that I actually grew up around football all the time because I was on the Palm squad in high school. So I went to every single football game and honestly just kind of despised it. And when we were postpartum, I can't remember when it was. It would have been like 2018, maybe somewhere in there.
Something like that.
I was like, I'm going to get really into the Kansas City Chiefs with Ben. We went to a football game.
Which really worked out because they weren't that good then, and now they're so good.
This was pre-Mahomes. I just want to say, okay?
We've been fans for a long time.
We have been fans for a long time, and I learned the Chiefs. I can now talk as good about football.
You could probably name almost every player.
Yeah, about football as any other guy because I paid attention because I knew it was like this is something that I think would be really meaningful to Ben and be something that we could share. So again, that's just something practical that I did. And I think it is for a woman, it is so much to like get out of your own little sphere and to be like, what would showing love to my husband in this season look like? And, sometimes it is sex. It is. But then also other things like the Kansas City Chiefs, being into them and to show him like, hey, like I'm going to care about something that is meaningful to you.
Yeah. All right. Tied to that, we just got a couple more. A phrase we used a lot was no scorekeeping. Mm-hmm. We recognized in our marriage that we were keeping score too much. I hate arguments like that. You forgot this and you dropped this ball and it's like, oh yeah, well I was doing this, and this while you were blah, 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 blah. And that went both ways, And then next thing you know it, you're bringing out all this dirt on your marriage and we haven't this, and you've not paid attention to me in this way. You've never listened. It just turns into this whole scorecard thing. We learned to like just ditch that, man. Yeah. And it was hard, but we eventually learned that we're both trying our best. And even nowadays, if some of those arguments might start, we had a scorekeeping argument like 2 weeks ago. I remember because it felt a little bit old school for us. And I was like, that wasn't cool. Sometimes we'll start one of those scorekeeping arguments, and then we're just like, wait. This is not going to go anywhere good. We both know we're doing our very best. Like, let's take a deep breath and figure out what we're actually frustrated about. It's like, you're just really stressed out today because you got a lot going on. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's the other thing about it.
And then it's like, okay, how can I help you?
Yeah, that's like, it goes back to sleep deprivation. Sometimes you think it's all these things, but actually it's like, you're actually just really tired and moody sometimes when you're arguing.
You just got to move on.
But I would just say to kind of start wrapping up this episode of like finding practical ways, like the 30-day challenge, like instituting a monthly date night. I know some couples that do weekly date nights.
I'm impressed.
What in the world? Who gets to do that?
My mom and dad talk about it, but they said that they brought me with them.
That's not a date night.
I agree, but that was their solution.
We did a lot of at-home date nights.
But I would say, and maybe you're going to talk about this, but the weekly check-in,
that's
the
good.
the family check-in night, I don't know, whatever we called it. We would designate once a week at home. We didn't go out for this, but we would designate once a week to check in with each other on stuff not about logistics, not about kids, not about planning. It was, how are you doing? Like, how are you? We didn't really talk about work necessarily. It was all about like, what are you processing right now? What's going on inside of your mind and your heart? And really just sharing with one another, was, just a huge practical thing that we did. And we would make it nice. Like we would do it after the babies were asleep. We would get like a cozy drink or whatever. Like we would just like have that time. We were really consistent
That's true.
Very consistent with that. And that honestly to me is more important than the date night thing. Unless,
Absolutely.
you really are just like, I need to get out of the house. Like, great.
Or you have your check-ins at your date night.
Right. And you could do the check-in at the date night. But for us, like in that season, that wasn't even always totally feasible on a weekly basis for sure. And so that at-home check-in became really like precious, special time that we had together.
Well, I would say it was really important for you because you would be your head would be spinning throughout the week taking care of the babies. You didn't really stop to really think about how you were feeling and what you were going through.
To this day, you asked me yesterday, how are you doing? He asked me, how are your feelings? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't actually thought about it. Let me think about it.
By the way,
I think I'm good.
I say it usually in a funny way. How are your feelings, Jess? But she knows what I mean, which is like, hey, Jess, how you doing? But, a lot of men struggle as well. And those check-ins are important for men, like to be reflective. And if you're not good at that, you should practice that because that's what makes you more diversified and able to express yourself. It actually is like a skill. I mean, being reflective is a skill and you got to practice it.
Yep. So check-in, try to implement a weekly check-in.
Weekly check-ins.
Even when you're newly postpartum, you can do it while you're nursing. You can do it anytime. But
so all those in the thick of it, hang in there, man. It's a finite period of time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just do your best. Nobody's asking you to have a perfect marriage.
Right. I think just intentionality is going to go a long way.
Yeah.
There's not a formula. There's not a pass fail. It really is just like, am I going to be intentional about trying to build my marriage in some way?
Yeah.
And hopefully today you got like some practical nuggets or just things that you could consider or even actually spend some time talking about together. Like maybe you're like, oh man, I really related to this, or this really resonated with me. And maybe you can have a weekly check-in and actually have like a discussion around something, that pinged off of you, so to speak. I think that could be a really good first step, because sometimes it's the first step that's the hardest. And then it's like, once you take that first step, then you can kind of learn how to be more intentional and it snowballs from there. So,
yep. All right. You can email your 30-day challenge story at podcast@balancedfamilies.com. Maybe win $100. Go on a date night.
Come on now. All right. See y'all next time. Thank you so much for listening today. It would mean so much to us if you left a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you heard this.
And let us know your thoughts on today's episode by leaving a comment on Spotify or YouTube, where you can also watch these episodes.